was 62 years old, a fisherman from Crescent City, California, who had seen every tide, every fog that crawled in from the Pacific. But that evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, he saw a crate bobbing alone, half submerged, drifting in a current that made no sense. There was something about the way it moved, almost like it was following him, the fading light catching on the rusted metal corners as if to signal him. When he approached and peered closer, something inside made a faint, hollow sound, and for a moment he thought he saw something move beneath the slats. When the authorities later came and looked inside, their faces drained of color, and they called in more men before anyone could speak. They still don't know how it ended up there, or who put it there. Would you dare to open this crate? Subscribe if you love true sea mysteries. They called him Samuel Price, but everyone along the Crescent City docks simply called him Sam. At 62, with deep lines across his brow and sun-spotted hands that smelled forever of salt, he was the type of fisherman who tied knots without looking and could read the water by the way it whispered against the hull. Sam had lived here all his life, waking before dawn, taking his modest boat, the Maribel, out past the last buoy, casting nets in the same waters where his father once taught him to listen for the change in wind. His routine was so precise that people along the harbor could almost set their watches by the sputtering of his engine as he headed out, returning with halibut and Dungeness crab, always in time to catch the last bit of the morning fog burning away. That particular day felt the same at first. He woke before the sun, made himself a cup of instant coffee too bitter to be enjoyable, and tied off the last crate of bait on the dock before heading out. The sky was streaked with thin ribbons of dawn, seagulls crying overhead as if reminding him that the sea was waiting. The Maribel's engine rumbled low, and he felt that small, familiar tightening in his chest, the one that reminded him he was still alive, still working, even if his knees hurt every time he pulled the nets. He spent the day pulling crab pots and checking nets, cursing at the seals that followed him, trying to steal what they could. The sea was calm enough, but there was a heaviness in the air, a weight that made the day feel longer than it should have. By late afternoon, the fog was rolling back in, creeping low over the water, swallowing the horizon and leaving Sam alone with the soft slap of waves against the Maribel's hull. He was about to turn back, the day's catch modest but enough, when he noticed something out of place. Just off the starboard side, in a patch of thinning fog, there was a shape, dark against the silver water. It moved oddly, bobbing but not drifting away with the tide, as if something heavy anchored it below. Sam squinted, wiping salt from the corner of his eye, watching as the shape slowly revealed itself. A crate, weathered, swollen from water, its edges splintered but still intact. At first he thought it might have fallen from a passing cargo ship, or perhaps from another fisherman's vessel, something that would drift until it sank or washed ashore. But as he steered closer, something about it made him slow down. There was a faint metallic glint along the edge, something rusted and jagged, catching the fading light. The crate rocked, and for a brief second, Sam thought he saw something shift inside, something dark pressing against the slats before falling still. Sam's heart thudded once, heavy in his chest. He wasn't a man easily spooked, not after decades on the water, but something about the crate felt wrong, out of place, like it didn't belong in these waters, or anywhere else. He circled it slowly, the engine idling as he leaned over the side, trying to get a better look. The crate was about 4 feet long, lashed with old rope that had frayed nearly to dust, and the wood was stained dark in places, the salt water having eaten away at the edges. There was a smell, too. Not the usual smell of seaweed and fish, but something different, something that made the back of Sam's throat tighten. It was faint, but enough that he pulled back for a moment, shaking his head, trying to convince himself it was just the brine, the decay of something caught on the wood. But then the crate rocked again, and that sound came, a hollow, muffled knock, as if something shifted inside and hit the side, or as if something was still trying to get out. He reached for the boat hook, prodding the crate gently, watching as it spun slowly in the water. It was heavier than it should have been, riding low, the water lapping over the top each time it shifted. The ropes were tied in a complicated series of knots, some of which Sam recognized as maritime, others that seemed almost random, twisted and looped in strange patterns that made no sense for securing cargo. As he leaned closer, he noticed something carved into one of the crate's planks, partially hidden under the algae and salt. At first it looked like scratches, but as he squinted, brushing away some of the grime with the tip of the boathook, he saw that they were letters. Faint, worn nearly smooth by water, but still there. A single word. Dusk. Sam pulled back, the word hanging in his mind, echoing in the soft hush of the fog. Dusk. It was strange, the way it was carved, each letter sharp, deliberate, as if whoever put it there wanted it to be found, or perhaps wanted it to be a warning. The crate rocked again, that sound inside rattling softly, and Sam felt the hair on the back of his neck rise. The sun was setting now, turning the fog into a pale orange glow, and Sam knew he should leave it alone, that whatever was inside wasn't his business. But there was something about the crate that pulled at him, a curiosity that overpowered the unease creeping up his spine. He thought of the stories old fishermen told, of things found at sea that never should have been, of strange cargo that washed up on beaches, and of ships that vanished, leaving nothing but wreckage and questions. He decided to bring it aboard. It wasn't easy. The crate was heavy, awkward, and every time he tried to pull it with the boathook, it would slip, water sloshing over the top. Finally, he managed to hook the rope around one of the cleats and use the small winch he normally reserved for heavier traps. The crate came up, water pouring from its seams, making a hollow thumping noise as it hit the deck. The smell was stronger now, sharp, metallic, tinged with something that made Sam cover his nose with the sleeve of his jacket. He stared at it, the word Dusk glistening in the fading light, the ropes limp and slick, draped across the wet deck like the remnants of something long dead. For a moment, Sam felt a deep, cold certainty that he had just made a mistake, that whatever was inside the crate should have stayed in the water, left to sink into the dark. But it was too late to put it back. He poked at it again, listening for the sound, and there it was, a faint, shifting rattle, like something moving just beneath the surface. He checked the sides, noting the rusted metal corners and the way the wood had warped, creating small gaps that leaked thin trails of dark water. The knots on the rope were strange, some of them tied so tightly that the rope had embedded itself into the wood, leaving deep grooves. Sam considered opening it right there, but the light was failing, and the fog was thickening around him, swallowing the last rays of sunlight and leaving him alone on the water with the crate, the Maribel rocking gently beneath him. A breeze came in, cold and smelling of salt, and Sam shivered, glancing around as if expecting to see another boat, someone watching, but there was no one. He decided to head back to shore, to bring the crate in, to show it to someone who might know what it was, or at least to get it off his boat. As he turned the Maribel toward the harbor, the crate shifted on the deck, rolling slightly with the movement of the boat. And that sound came again, louder this time, unmistakable. A thump, followed by a dragging scrape like something shifting inside, pressed against the wood. Sam didn't like it. He kept glancing back, half expecting the crate to move on its own, to slide across the deck, but it stayed where it was, dark water pooling around it, dripping through the cracks in the deck. The word Dusk was visible even in the failing light, and Sam found himself saying it out loud, tasting the word, feeling how wrong it sounded in the quiet. The harbor lights appeared through the fog, small beacons that grew brighter as he approached. Sam felt a small measure of relief, the comfort of shore, of people, of the familiar sounds of the docks. But as he approached, he realized he couldn't just walk away from the crate, leave it on the dock, and pretend he hadn't found it. There was something about it, something that felt unfinished, as if it had chosen him, as if he was now responsible for whatever was inside. He tied the Maribel off at his usual spot, the fog drifting through the beams of the dock lights, making everything look like a scene from another world. The crate sat there, heavy, leaking, the word Dusk, a silent promise. Sam climbed off the boat, tying off the lines, and stood there for a moment, staring at the crate, the cold night air pressing in around him. He knew he needed help. Whatever was inside wasn't something he could handle alone, and the longer he stood there, the more certain he became that it was something important, something dangerous, or something that someone would eventually come looking for. And he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that someone in the fog was waiting to see what he would do next. Sam didn't sleep that night. He tried, lying in his small, dark room above the bait shop he rented near the docks, the smell of salt and diesel clinging to the wooden walls. But every time he closed his eyes, he heard that sound, the crate shifting, the soft scrape, the hollow thump that echoed in his memory. Outside, the foghorn droned in the distance, steady and lonely, reminding him that the sea was still there, waiting. At dawn, he was back at the Maribel. The crate was where he left it, but it looked different in the early gray light, more sinister somehow, like it had settled into the deck, claiming the space as its own. Water had pooled beneath it, dark and slick, smelling of rust and something else he couldn't name. The word dusk was darker now, the grooves in the wood deeper than he remembered. He touched it, half expecting it to move under his hand, but it was still, cold and heavy. The rope was stiff with salt, the knots tight, but as he examined it, he noticed something else. Small scratches around the edges of the lid, like fingernails, or something sharper had tried to pry it open. He pulled his hand back, a chill running through him despite the muggy morning air. Sam thought about just calling the police, letting them handle it, but there was a nagging curiosity inside him, stronger than fear, stronger than reason. He had found it. It was his, in a way, and he needed to know what it was before he handed it over. Besides, what if it was nothing? Just junk, something that would waste the time of people who had real work to do. But deep down, he knew it wasn't nothing. He grabbed a crowbar from the storage hatch, the metal cold in his hand, and stood over the crate, taking a deep breath. The Maribel rocked gently beneath him, the sound of water slapping against the hull a steady reminder of the world around him. But all he could focus on was the crate, the way it seemed to hum with quiet potential, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for him to act. The first pull didn't do much, the wood groaning but holding firm. He repositioned the crowbar, wedging it under a corner where the wood had split, and pushed harder, feeling the resistance, the tension in the metal, until there was a sharp crack, and the corner of the lid lifted slightly, just enough for a thin wisp of foul-smelling air to escape. Sam gagged, stepping back, covering his mouth, the stench sharp and metallic, tinged with something rotten. It was worse than the smell of dead fish, worse than anything he had encountered in his years on the water. He turned away, breathing through his mouth, trying to clear his head, but the curiosity was too strong, pulling him back. He wedged the crowbar in again, prying the lid higher, each creak of the wood sounding impossibly loud in the morning quiet. Finally, with a sharp crack, the lid broke free, falling back against the crate with a thud, and Sam stumbled backward, nearly dropping the crowbar. Inside, it was dark, the interior lined with a tarp or heavy cloth, wet and clinging to whatever was beneath it. He could see something moving slightly as the boat rocked, something shifting under the fabric, and he froze, the crowbar slipping from his fingers and clattering to the deck. For a moment he thought he saw something pale beneath the folds of cloth, something shaped like a hand, or maybe it was just the way the fabric had bunched up, catching the light in a way that made it look like fingers. He shook his head, blinking, forcing himself to move closer. He reached out, grabbing a corner of the fabric, pulling it back slowly, the wet cloth heavy, sticking to whatever was beneath it. As he pulled, the smell grew stronger, and he gagged again, turning his head, but forcing himself to keep pulling until the contents of the crate were exposed. It was a box, smaller than the crate itself, made of metal, with rusted hinges and a heavy lock that looked like it had been broken recently. The box was bolted to the bottom of the crate, ropes tied around it as if to keep it from shifting. Around it were smaller objects, wrapped in plastic, some of them leaking dark liquid that pooled in the bottom of the crate. Sam didn't touch the box. Instead, he examined the smaller objects, picking one up carefully, feeling the weight of it in his hands. It was heavy, solid, and as he unwrapped a corner of the plastic, he saw metal beneath, dark and oily like old machinery. But there was something else too, something carved into the metal, symbols or letters that he couldn't read, worn and faded but still visible. He felt a jolt of fear and excitement, realizing that whatever was in the crate wasn't just junk, wasn't just debris lost at sea. This was something important, something that someone had hidden, and for some reason, it had ended up in his hands. But why him? Why here? As he stood there, trying to make sense of what he was seeing, he heard a noise behind him, a soft clatter on the dock, and he turned quickly, heart pounding, half expecting to see someone standing there, watching him. But there was no one, just the fog rolling in again, thicker now, swallowing the edges of the world. He needed help. He couldn't do this alone, and he didn't want to. Whatever was in that box, it wasn't something he was prepared to deal with. Not alone, not here. He pulled out his phone, hands shaking slightly, and dialed the number of the only person he trusted in situations like this. Mark, a younger fisherman and part-time Coast Guard volunteer, someone who knew how to keep his mouth shut when necessary. Mark answered on the third ring, his voice groggy, but alert as Sam explained what he had found. The crate, the box, the strange objects, the smell. There was a pause, and then Mark said he would be there in 20 minutes. Sam waited, standing by the crate, staring at the metal box, the strange symbols, the dark liquid pooling around the plastic-wrapped objects. He felt exposed, vulnerable, standing there in the fog, the quiet pressing in around him, every creak of the dock making him jump. When Mark arrived, he was wearing his Coast Guard jacket, his hair still damp from a quick shower, eyes sharp as he took in the scene. He said nothing at first, just examined the crate, the contents, the box, the plastic-wrapped objects, his brow furrowing deeper with each passing second. "What the hell is this, Sam?" Mark finally asked, his voice low, serious. "I don't know," Sam replied, shaking his head. "I found it out there near the channel. It was just floating." Mark crouched down, touching the edge of the box, examining the symbols. "These look like serial numbers," he said, pointing to the markings, "but I've never seen ones like this." They decided to try to open the box to see what was inside before calling anyone else. Mark pulled out a small toolkit he kept in his truck, using a pry tool to work at the rusted hinges, the metal creaking under the pressure, flakes of rust falling away like red snow. It took nearly 20 minutes, but finally, with a sharp crack, the lock gave way, and the box opened with a loud metallic groan. Inside, wrapped in layers of oiled cloth, were objects that neither of them expected: old but well-preserved weapons, strange tools, and what looked like parts of old diving equipment, but unlike any they had ever seen before. There was also a notebook, leather-bound, the cover cracked and worn, but the pages inside still intact, filled with dense handwriting, sketches of mechanical parts, strange symbols, and what appeared to be maps. Mark pulled out the notebook carefully, flipping through the pages, his eyes widening as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. "This looks like some kind of journal," he said, his voice tight with excitement and confusion. "These maps, they're of the coast, but there are markings I don't recognize." Sam leaned over his shoulder, trying to read the cramped handwriting, but it was difficult. The words in a mix of English and what looked like another language, possibly German, with dates that ranged from 1942 to 1945. "Is this from World War II?" Sam asked, his mind racing. Mark didn't answer, but his face said it all. They both realized that whatever they had found wasn't just valuable. It was potentially historic, something that could explain old rumors about strange activities off the coast during the war. Sam looked out at the fog, the water beyond, and felt a cold certainty settle over him. Someone had hidden this crate for a reason, and now that it had been found, it was only a matter of time before someone came looking for it. They carefully packed everything back into the crate, covering it with the tarp, and decided to move it into Mark's truck for safekeeping until they could figure out what to do next. As they lifted the crate, Sam felt that shifting inside again, that soft thump, and he froze, looking at Mark. "Did you hear that?" Mark nodded, his face pale. "Yeah, I heard it." They exchanged a look, both of them understanding that whatever was inside, whatever was causing that noise, was still there, waiting. And as they drove away from the dock, the fog closing in behind them, Sam couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that someone, somewhere knew exactly what they had found and was already coming to claim it. If you're still here, you're exactly the kind of person who loves these true, eerie discoveries at sea. Hit the like button to help more people find this story. Subscribe for more deep-sea mysteries that no one else will tell you. And let me know in the comments, what do you think is really inside that crate? And who do you think put it there in the first place? Mark drove in silence, his hands gripping the wheel tighter than necessary, the crate in the back of the truck thumping softly with each bump in the cracked road that led away from the harbor. Sam sat in the passenger seat, his eyes fixed on the side mirror, watching as the fog swallowed the dock behind them, the outlines of the fishing boats fading until there was nothing but gray. They didn't speak until they reached Mark's workshop, a small, weather-worn building tucked behind a row of cypress trees on the edge of Crescent City. It smelled of oil and salt, the floor scattered with tools and nets, the walls lined with charts of the Pacific coastline, old radios, and spare engine parts. It was the kind of place where secrets could sit quietly without being disturbed. at least for a while. Together, they unloaded the crate, the weight of it making their arms strain, the wood groaning as they set it down in the middle of the workshop. The soft, wet thump came again from inside, and both men froze, exchanging a glance that spoke volumes. Mark swallowed, wiped his hands on his jeans, and nodded. "Let's get a better look at this," he said. They removed the tarp, exposing the contents again. The smaller weapons, the strange tools, the old diving equipment, and that leather-bound notebook, its pages filled with cramped writing and sketches that neither of them fully understood. The smell was less sharp now, but it still clung to the objects, a reminder that they had spent years, maybe decades, submerged in the cold dark of the Pacific. Mark pulled out the notebook again, carefully turning the pages while Sam examined one of the objects, a strange brass instrument shaped like a compass, but with extra dials, and a thin curved needle that moved even when there was no motion. It was heavier than it looked, and the brass was etched with the same symbols they had seen on the metal box, symbols that looked like they belonged in another time, another world. "What is this?" Sam asked, turning it over, trying to make sense of the symbols. Mark shook his head, his eyes scanning the pages. "I don't know, but according to this," he tapped a page with a rough sketch of the instrument Sam was holding. "It's something called a depth resonance indicator." Sam frowned. "A what?" Mark flipped the page, revealing a crude diagram of the device attached to what looked like an old diving suit, with arrows pointing to various parts, notes scribbled in German and English. "It looks like it was designed to detect something underwater, maybe metals or, I don't know, something else." They studied the notebook for hours, piecing together fragments of information, mentions of deep-water anomaly, coordinates marked in red ink, sketches of underwater caves, and repeated references to Operation Dusk, a phrase circled multiple times alongside the year 1944. One page was entirely filled with the word Dusk, written over and over, the ink smudged, the handwriting becoming more frantic toward the bottom. "What the hell was Operation Dusk?" Sam muttered, rubbing his temples. Mark's phone buzzed, breaking the heavy silence. It was a message from a friend at the local Coast Guard station, asking if Mark had heard about a report of a missing cargo container off a ship that had been reported adrift near their coast 2 nights ago. Mark's face went pale as he read it out loud. "You think it's connected?" Sam asked, his voice low. Mark nodded slowly. "Maybe, but if this crate was part of that cargo, why does it look like it's been underwater for decades?" They fell silent, the weight of the mystery settling over them like the fog that still clung to the coast outside. Sam glanced at the crate, at the weapons and tools, the notebook, the strange device, and the dark stains on the wood, and he felt the same deep certainty he had felt on the water. This wasn't just a forgotten shipment or a lost crate. This was something much bigger, something that someone, somewhere, had gone to great lengths to hide. They decided to call in an expert. Mark had a contact, a retired naval historian named Dr. Eleanor Price, who lived a few towns over in Eureka. She had spent her career studying the history of naval operations along the Pacific coast, particularly during World War II, and if anyone could help them understand what they had found, it was her. When they called her, explaining in vague terms what they had discovered, there was a long pause before she spoke. "Operation Dusk?" she said, her voice calm but carrying an edge of surprise. "Are you sure that's what it says?" Mark confirmed, and Eleanor was quiet again before she spoke. "I'll be there in the morning." That night, neither of them slept much. Mark stayed in the workshop, sitting in an old folding chair, a shotgun resting across his knees just in case. Sam returned to his small room, but he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was outside, watching, waiting. Every creak of the old building made him tense. Every gust of wind rattling the windows felt like a signal that something was coming. In the morning, Dr. Eleanor Price arrived, stepping out of her old sedan with a canvas bag over her shoulder, her sharp eyes taking in the workshop, the crate, and the exhausted looks on the faces of the 2 men. She was in her late 60s, her gray hair tied back, her movements efficient, her presence commanding without being harsh. "Show me," she said simply. They opened the crate, laying out the contents, showing her the notebook, the device, the weapons, the symbols. Eleanor examined everything carefully, her gloved hands moving with the precision of someone who had spent her life handling fragile pieces of history. "This device," she said, holding up the brass instrument, is a prototype resonance locator. The Germans experimented with devices like this during the war, hoping to detect Allied submarines and hidden mines. But this, she pointed to the extra dials and the curved needle. This is different. It's more advanced than anything I've seen from that period. She flipped through the notebook, her eyes scanning the pages, stopping at the maps, the sketches, the repeated references to Operation Dusk. Operation Dusk was rumored to be a covert mission, she explained. It was never officially documented, but there were whispers that a German U-boat was working with Japanese forces along the Pacific, searching for something off the coast of California. Some said it was a weapon. Others believed it was a hunt for rare minerals, or even something older, something hidden in the sea caves. Sam felt a chill run through him. And you think this crate is connected? Eleanor nodded slowly. It's possible. These coordinates, she tapped the map. They're near a series of underwater caves off the coast here. Caves that local fishermen avoid because of strange currents and stories of lights beneath the water. Mark leaned forward, his brow furrowed. What kind of stories? Eleanor hesitated. Stories of divers disappearing, of boats losing power when passing over certain areas, of strange sounds, mechanical sounds, coming from deep below. Most people think it's just local superstition, but she glanced at the crate, the contents, the notebook. Maybe it isn't. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the revelation settling in. Sam felt the room closing in, the small workshop suddenly feeling like the center of something much larger, something they were only beginning to understand. Eleanor looked at them, her expression serious. Whatever you found, it's important. And if it was hidden for a reason. We need to be careful. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the tin roof of the workshop, the sound echoing like distant footsteps. Sam glanced at the crate, at the strange device, at the notebook with its frantic notes and mysterious maps, and he felt that familiar tightening in his chest, the same feeling he had felt when he first saw the crate floating alone in the dusk light. What do we do now? Mark asked quietly. Eleanor closed the notebook carefully, looking at both of them. Now we find out what they were looking for and why. If you've made it this far, you're part of the rare few who chase these deep-sea mysteries to the end. Tap the like button if you want more stories like this to reach others. Subscribe if you want to follow what we uncover next. And tell me in the comments below, what do you think Operation Dusk was truly searching for beneath the Pacific? Because this mystery is far from over. They decided to follow the map. The morning fog was still lifting off the Pacific when Sam, Mark, and Dr. Eleanor Price loaded the strange device, the notebook, and a pair of waterproof lamps into the Maribel. The small boat rocked gently as they stepped aboard, the water beneath them reflecting a pale gray sky that seemed to stretch forever. Sam's hands were steady on the tiller, but inside, a quiet war raged between fear and the unstoppable pull of curiosity. The coordinates from the notebook were clear, leading them about 3 miles off the coast to an area the locals called Silent Hollow, a stretch of sea notorious among fishermen for odd compass spins, engine failures, and the eerie sense that something below was always watching. Most boats avoided it, but today they aimed directly for it. Mark sat at the bow, the strange brass resonance locator clutched in his hands, the curved needle twitching as if it had a mind of its own each time they crossed certain ripples in the water. Eleanor leaned over a waterproof map, tracing the exact position while glancing between the notebook and the horizon. There, she said finally, pointing to a narrow strip of water where the waves seemed strangely uniform, almost as if the ocean were breathing. Drop anchor. Sam cut the engine, and the silence was immediate. The usual cries of gulls were gone, replaced by the low hush of water lapping against the hull. Mark flipped a switch on the resonance locator, and the needle jumped, twitching violently before settling, pointing directly downward. What's it picking up? Sam asked. Eleanor adjusted her glasses, watching the dial carefully. Something metallic, large and deep. Whatever was down there in 1944 may still be there. Sam felt a chill as he leaned over, peering into the gray water. It looked bottomless, a vast, unknowable void. Mark began preparing the underwater camera rig they had borrowed from the harbor patrol, carefully lowering it into the water, the cable unspooling as the camera descended into the darkness. For a moment, the screen showed nothing but greenish water and drifting strands of kelp. Then shapes began to emerge, rocks, coral, and then something different, something angular and dark, partially buried in silt. Mark adjusted the camera, moving it closer, and the shape became clearer. A section of corroded metal plating, curved with rivets along the edges. "That's part of a hull," Eleanor whispered. "That's a U-boat." The realization struck them all at once, the weight of history rising from the depths. Sam's mind filled with images of 1944, of dark shapes moving beneath the waves, of men in uniforms working in silence, running secret operations in the cold, black water off the California coast. As they moved the camera along the hull, more of the wreck came into view. It was broken in places, the steel twisted as if by an explosion, but parts of it were remarkably intact. Near what remained of the conning tower, something else was lodged against the metal. A crate, nearly identical to the one Sam had found, half buried in sand. The rope still tied around it like a ghostly reminder of what it once carried. "There's another crate," Mark said, his voice tight with excitement. Eleanor leaned closer to the screen. This could be part of a larger operation. If these crates were scattered, what were they trying to move, and why here? Sam felt that same cold certainty in his chest. The crate he had found was not a fluke. It was part of something much larger, a puzzle stretching across decades and miles of ocean, waiting for someone to finally put the pieces together. Mark adjusted the camera again, moving it past the crate toward a dark opening in the hull. For a moment, the camera shook, the image blurring, and a loud crack came from the speakers, like static mixed with a mechanical groan. "What was that?" Sam asked, gripping the edge of the console. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "That's interference from something inside." On the screen, a faint light flickered deep within the wreck, as if something was reflecting the camera's light back, but in a rhythmic pattern, almost like blinking. "That's not possible," Mark whispered. "There's no power down there." But the light blinked again, 2 quick flashes, then one long, before fading. Sam felt the hair on his arms rise. Did we just get signaled? They stared at the screen, the silence around them growing heavier with each passing second. Eleanor quickly flipped through the notebook, stopping at a page where the words, "Dusk signal," were written above a series of dashes and dots. "It's Morse code," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It said, "Help." Mark swallowed hard. "You're telling me something down there just asked us for help?" Eleanor's face was pale, but her eyes burned with the fierce curiosity of someone who had spent her life chasing the truth. "Or it's a signal that's been repeating since 1944, waiting for someone to see it." They had to get closer. Sam and Mark suited up in dry suits, their bodies tense as they prepared to dive. The water was cold, the kind of cold that seeped into your bones no matter how many layers you wore. Eleanor remained on the boat, monitoring the camera feed and the resonance locator, ready to guide them if something went wrong. As Sam descended into the water, the world above disappeared, replaced by a muffled silence and the cold pressure of the deep. His light cut through the green darkness, illuminating schools of small fish that scattered as he and Mark moved downward, following the rope connected to the camera. The wreck loomed below them, massive and dark, its corroded metal sides rising like the walls of a tomb. They moved toward the crate first, checking its markings. It was stamped with the same symbols as the one on the Maribel, but the wood had nearly dissolved, leaving the metal frame exposed, encrusted with barnacles. Sam touched it, and as he did, the resonance locator on the boat crackled, the needle swinging violently. Eleanor's voice came through the earpiece, tight with urgency. "Be careful. I'm picking up a pulse from inside the wreck." Mark moved toward the opening in the hull, his light cutting through the dark, illuminating the narrow passage that led into the interior of the U-boat. The walls were covered in rust, strange algae, and patches of darkness where the light seemed to get swallowed, refusing to reflect. They entered. Inside, the wreck was a frozen world of shadows, with collapsed sections of the ceiling hanging like jagged teeth. Old cables drifted in the currents and objects littered the floor. Broken equipment, rusted canisters, and fragments of crates similar to the ones they had found. And then they saw it. At the far end of the corridor, in what remained of the radio room, a small device was still flickering with a weak, rhythmic light, connected to an old battery array that was nearly corroded beyond recognition. The device was shaped like a cube, covered in symbols, with wires trailing into the darkness. "It's still working," Mark said, his voice awed. Sam moved closer, peering at the device, watching as the light blinked in that same pattern. "Help!" Suddenly a loud crack echoed through the wreck. and the floor beneath them shifted, a section of the ceiling collapsing behind them, cutting off their exit. Silt exploded into the water, clouding everything in a choking darkness, their lights cutting through a swirling storm of debris. "Sam! Mark! Get out of there now!" Eleanor's voice screamed in their ears. They turned, but the way out was blocked. The only way forward was deeper into the wreck, past the blinking device, into the darkness that swallowed the light. As they moved, Sam glanced back one last time, seeing the blinking light fade slowly, the last signal of something or someone trapped in the depths, waiting for rescue that would never come. When they finally found another exit, forcing their way through a torn section of the hull, they emerged into the cold Pacific, gasping for air as they surfaced, the Maribel a silent sentinel above them. Eleanor helped them aboard, her hands trembling as she pulled them over the side. They sat on the deck, coughing, shivering, staring at each other with the wide eyes of men who had seen something they couldn't explain, something that had reached out from the past to touch them in the present. Eleanor held up the resonance locator, which was still crackling, the needle twitching wildly. "Whatever was down there, it's still active, and it's not done with us. If you're still watching, you are exactly the kind of person who needs to see where this leads. Please hit the like button so we can bring more deep-sea mysteries to people who crave these hidden truths. Subscribe if you want to follow what we uncover next, and let me know in the comments. Do you believe that signal was really a message from 1944? Or is there something down there alive, trying to reach us? Because whatever it is, it's waiting for us to come back." The workshop was different now. The crate sat in the center, empty except for the strange brass device, the cracked notebook, and the shadows that seemed to gather around it whenever the lights flickered. The resonance locator hummed softly on the workbench, its needle twitching even though it should have been off, reacting to something unseen. Sam hadn't slept since the dive. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw the blinking light in the dark, heard the echo of that single desperate word, help. Mark was the same, pacing the workshop floor, unable to leave, unable to look away from the device that refused to die. Eleanor pored over the notebook, translating line by line, her notes scattered across the workbench, a map of a puzzle that still had pieces missing. They had brought something back with them, not physically, but in the tension that hung in the air, in the sense that they were being watched, that at any moment a knock on the workshop door would come, and they would be forced to explain what they had found, or what had found them. At dawn, Eleanor lifted her head from the notebook, her eyes red from exhaustion, but alive with the flicker of discovery. "I think I know what they were looking for." Sam and Mark leaned in, the hum of the resonance locator matching the rhythm of their hearts. She tapped a passage in the notebook, her finger underlining a phrase written in English, circled repeatedly in faded ink. "Resonance threshold, gateway signal at dusk." It wasn't just about moving crates or testing equipment, Eleanor said, her voice low. They were looking for something that reacts to this signal, something deep in those caves. Mark frowned. React how? She looked up, her expression haunted. A doorway, or something like it. They stared at her, the hum of the device growing louder, the needle on the resonance locator twitching violently, before snapping to one side and holding, as if pointing to something only it could see. The lights in the workshop flickered, and for a moment Sam could have sworn he saw a shadow move across the back wall, tall, thin, gone as quickly as it appeared. The air grew heavy, the workshop pressing in on them, the scent of salt and rust mixing with something older, something that smelled like the deep ocean. Mark turned off the resonance locator, but it kept humming, the needle locked in place. "We need to go back," Sam said quietly. Eleanor nodded. Whatever they found in 1944, it's still there, and it's still calling. They prepared the Maribel, loading the resonance locator, the notebook, underwater lights, and the brass instrument that had started to vibrate gently whenever the locator was near. It was as if the device knew, as if it wanted to return to the place it had been built for. As they left the harbor, the morning fog rolled back in, thicker than before, swallowing the coastline until the world was only the sound of the engine and the lapping water against the hull. The coordinates led them back to Silent Hollow, where the ocean felt heavier, the waves oddly still, the air sharp with the scent of salt and something electric. They dropped anchor above the wreck, and the resonance locator immediately came to life, the needle pointing downward, the hum rising into a high-pitched whine before dropping into a rhythmic pulse, matching the distant echo of the ocean against the hull. They suited up again, but this time, Eleanor insisted on joining them. "This is what I've been looking for my entire life," she said, her eyes steady, unafraid. They descended into the water, the cold wrapping around them like a living thing, pulling at their limbs as they followed the line down to the wreck. The U-boat was silent, the entry they had used before still open, the shadows inside shifting with the current. As they entered, the resonance locator pulsed faster, the brass device vibrating in Sam's hand, the curved needle inside spinning wildly. The notebook, sealed in a waterproof bag on Eleanor's chest, pressed against her as if urging her forward. They reached the radio room, where the blinking light had called to them before, but now the light was constant, bright, illuminating the symbols etched into the walls, symbols that matched those in the notebook, symbols that seemed to glow in the darkness. Eleanor reached out, touching one of the symbols, and the resonance locator emitted a sharp crack, followed by silence. The light in the room flickered, then brightened, and the metal wall in front of them shifted, grinding as it moved, revealing a narrow passage behind it, filled with darkness so complete it seemed to swallow the beams of their lights. Without speaking, they moved forward, the passage narrowing, the pressure of the water around them growing heavier, the darkness ahead pressing against them like a living thing. The brass device in Sam's hand pulsed, matching the rhythm of his heartbeat, guiding them deeper until they emerged into a cavern, a vast space hidden beneath the ocean floor, untouched by light, unseen by any living person for decades. In the center of the cavern stood a structure, metal and stone fused together, covered in the same symbols, glowing faintly with a light that seemed to come from within the walls themselves. The resonance locator, strapped to Mark's wrist, beeped once, then died, the screen going dark. Eleanor moved forward, her hand reaching out, touching the structure, and as she did, the cavern was filled with a low hum, a vibration that passed through the water and into their bones, making their teeth ache and their lights flicker. Sam felt the brass device heat in his hand, the vibrations growing stronger until it snapped open, revealing a hidden compartment inside. Inside the compartment was a crystal, small, clear, but glowing with a pale blue light that pulsed in time with the hum in the cavern. Eleanor turned to Sam, her eyes wide, her voice shaking. This is what they were looking for. Before Sam could respond, the cavern shook, a deep rumble passing through the water, dust and silt falling like snow around them. The light in the structure brightened, and the hum grew into a low roar, vibrating the cavern, the structure, and them. And then, for a moment, the darkness split open. A flash of light, a vision of something vast, something alive, moving through the depths of the ocean beyond, eyes like suns watching them from the abyss, and a voice, not heard but felt, pressing into their minds with a single word: return. The light vanished, the cavern plunged back into darkness, the hum fading until there was only the sound of their breath, ragged and shaking, echoing in their helmets. They turned, swimming back through the passage, out of the wreck, up through the dark water, breaking the surface with gasping breaths as the Maribel rocked in the swell above them. The fog was gone, the sky clear, the sun rising over the horizon, painting the sea in gold. On the deck, they lay in silence, the crystal between them, still pulsing with its pale light, the resonance locator dead, the brass device now cold and inert. They had found it, but as they looked at each other, they knew the mystery was only beginning, because now, something in the deep knew they had found it too, and it was waiting. If you made it to the end of this journey, you're exactly the kind of person who deserves to know the truth we will continue to uncover from the depths. Hit the like button if you want more true deep-sea mysteries that the world needs to see. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what we discover next, because this story isn't over. And comment below, what do you think that crystal truly is? And who or what do you believe sent that message from the darkness of the Pacific? Because some mysteries are meant to be explored, and we will go back